Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at some wines from one of the Chablis region's new stars, Thomas Pico. So this is Thomas Pico's Domaine Pattes Loup, and this is his Vendange Chablis 2021. So Pattes Loup, the wolf's paws, is a domain belonging to Thomas Pico. Thomas, still a relatively young man, started his domain in 2005. Thomas grew up in the tiny village of Courgis, which is probably about 2 kilometres southwest of the town of Chablis on the opposite bank of the river. And he grew up there in a family where his father was a vigneron and his grandfather was a vigneron, both producing Chablis, of course. He studied viticulture and enology at Beaune, going on to work for a short period in Nuit Saint-Georges, some time in Volnay, and also worked for a bit in Saint-Aubin, before returning to his family's Domaine Bois d'Hiver, in 2004. But Thomas wasn't really happy working for his family domain. He felt he wanted to make his mark. And so in 2005 he set up Domaine Pattes Loup, starting with 2.45 hectares of vines that had belonged to his grandfather. 2 hectares of those were village level Chablis, and the remainder being in the Boutier Premier Cru, which is part of the larger Premier Cru of Montmain. In that same year, he took over the running of 8 hectares of his father's vineyards as well. Very quickly, Thomas moved over to applying organic viticulture, something which is quite risky in as cool and wet an area of Chablis. But by 2009, he had certification for his vineyards as being organic. And today, some of the vineyards are actually also certified by Demeter as being run biodynamically. Thomas's approach is very much to focus on quality. He's fortunate to have some very old vines. He ensures that yields are kept low. He insists on everything being hand-picked. He will only ferment using indigenous yeasts. A proportion of his Chablis ferments in egg-shaped fermenters, and he practices a very long aging period on lees. He'll then go on to bottle these wines unfined, unfiltered, and with very low levels of sulfur dioxide. Thomas believes that the entire winemaking process should be completely transparent. As a result, his labels detail things like the amount of free SO2 in the wine at bottling. Bottling date is quite clearly there, as are logos that show that the wine is unfined and unfiltered and it's undergone this extended aging. Today, Thomas owns 15 hectares of vineyard, and these are principally on Chablis' left bank. Now, this first wine is from the 2021 vintage, which was a tiny vintage, but as a result, generally quality was very high. The main limiter of yields was the fact that after a warm, wet winter, both frosts and snow arrived in April, so the fruit that had been encouraged to set early because of the mild winter was largely decimated. The Vendange Chablis is not only certified as being organic, but this is the wine that I'm looking at of Thomas's that is certified as being biodynamic by Demeter. I really do love the labels here. As I say, there's a detailing of the sulfur dioxide levels, there's a bottling date, there's a lot number, the fact that it's hand picking, you've got the Demeter certification, you've got the fact that it's BioGrow registered, you've got the fact it's non-filtered, Mise tardive, which is the long aging, and then you've got this you've also got a beautiful stylish picture of the angel that I assume the wine is named after. So it's a very well presented wine. This is a village level Chablis, but it's coming off vines that have ages between 55 and 70 years old. So you should be getting wonderful concentrated fruit even without actively working to limit yields, which Thomas does very vigorously. As I say, everything has to be hand-picked. It's also sorted by hand on vibrating sorting tables. Fermentation, as I say, takes place with indigenous yeasts, so yeasts that are either in the winery or have made their way into the winery on the fruit. And somewhere between 30 and 40% of the wine is fermented in concrete eggs. The rest, I assume, will ferment in stainless steel tanks. And the wine ages with its fine lees for an additional year above what is normal. It's bottled unfined and unfiltered. And looking at the label, there's a total sulfur dioxide of just 25 milligrams per litre, which is not high at all. So let's have a look at the wine and see what we make of it, shall we? The wine has a relatively deep colour, and that could relate to the fact that it has a low level of sulfur dioxide. Swirling it, it's got 12.5% alcohol. It's not particularly forming heavy tears on the glass. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? In general, the aromas are quite rich and creamy. However, there's some quite high-toned citrus blossom, perhaps limey, maybe grapefruit notes. There's sort of a slightly waxy nature to the aromas, which is what makes me think of limes. So let's have a taste. On the palate, the wine is dry. There's a freshness. There's freshness coming from good acidity, but the acidity is not particularly tart. And there's a lovely round richness. Sort of a note of ripe pear, apple. The acidity is following it all on, but there's almost a sort of a honeyed richness to it. There's no sweetness, let's be clear about that. But there really is a lovely intensity, and that intensity is being followed up by some beautiful mineral acidity at the finish. It's helping to bring out delicate apple notes. The wine has a touch of weight. It's a mid-weight. I guess the texture has some creamy notes. The alcohol doesn't seem to be unduly giving too much weight to the back palate. And the finish has creamy notes, citric notes that manage to marry beautifully together. There is this sort of freshness at the finish that's very attractive. It's unusually rich and rounded for a Chablis. I would normally expect there to be more of the sharp, cutting acidity. And here, although there is plentiful acidity, there's a richness to the fruit that's unexpected, that's overlaying that and softening it. I don't think there is the sort of the tart malic content to the acidity that you might normally expect from a Chablis either. So this is a really interesting style of wine. It's got a richness and roundness. It's got beautiful balance. I mean, the balance and intensity of this wine is very impressive. From the start, although the aromas aren't enormously pronounced, they have an intensity and a presence which carries right through the rest of the wine. There's an impressive accomplishment and balance to it. I looked at our aggregated critics score for this wine. We don't particularly have a score for the 2021 vintage, but overall the wine is scoring 89 out of 100. I think that perhaps that overall score is perhaps being pulled back a little by earlier vintages which might have scored lower, and I think more recent vintages is probably scoring higher. Certainly it's a beautifully made wine with some lovely intensity. I think it would have the ability to age beautifully for at least 4 or 5 years, possibly longer. Although it may not specifically be what I was looking for a Chablis, I'm actually quite impressed with this. I would be interested to find out more about Thomas Pico's wines. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the video. If you found it interesting, please do take the time to press the like button. That would be fantastic. If you'd like to watch more of our videos, we'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel. That would help us. It would also enable you to set yourself an alert, and that way you'd be notified every time we publish a new video. If you have any comments, please pop those in the comments box below. We'd be really interested by your feedback about either the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. If you'd like to share the video with any of your friends you think might enjoy watching it, we'd very much appreciate that endorsement from you. That would be fantastic. But most importantly, I do hope you'll manage to make some time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Thanks again. Bye for now.